So I've got this unpopular, maybe unconventional concept or perspective, if you will, that I want to share with you. And I want to back it by science for all of my fellow healthy skeptics out there. I feel you and I see you. So if you like getting down and nerdy and learning new things, stick around. If you like short and sweet, this may not be the best for you, but I promise I am going to do my best to try to sum it up quick. But I really like to paint a whole picture for you. Think Sophia on Golden Girls, and every time she shares a story, it's like, picture this. I want to walk you through. I'm a visual thinker, seer, speaker. So I want to try to get you the whole piece so you can see how my brain works and puzzles it together. So if that intrigues you, keep on watching. So what the fluff is this woohoo, wackadoo, spiritual cold, spiritual flu thing I'm talking about? In short, I'm going to walk you through the science behind what I would call the physical manifestation of the purging, releasing process of doing deep inner healing work. So we're going to go and touch on some quantum science, neuroscience, epigenetics. We're going to dive into a bit of like the metaphysical side, energy work, somatics, nervous system. Like we're going to take it there, and I'm going to build you in layers up to this. So stick with me. As humans, we are both matter and energy, particle and wave, body and consciousness. Everything is energy and frequency, and that all holds information. So as humans, we have our 5 senses that help plug us into our 3-dimensional reality, that being defined as height, width, and depth. This is how we experience and perceive our world around us in the material world. We are also sentient beings, feeling beings. We have these things called emotions. And I want you to think of those as an internal navigation system, like a compass. And we know that some of these emotions feel good and some not so good. I'm going to show you some charts that are going to help explain some of the next concepts we're getting into a little bit better so that you have visuals to go with this as well. So this is a light wave chart. I screenshotted this from the show Rewired on Gaia. If you don't have Gaia, highly recommend. So this is from Joe Dispenza's show, and he shows how, like in the red zone with wave, it's very slow. In the middle, it's a little bit faster waves, and up here, it's a higher frequency wave. When we compare this to the scale of consciousness, we're able to see the same kind of color pattern working upwards, and down at the base here, we have our low frequency, low vibrational emotions, like shame and guilt, apathy, grief, fear, and it works its way up into the higher frequency emotions. We see how this is like our lower, denser ego self, the victim abuser consciousness. Then we move up into self-empowered, and we move up into self-realization with the higher self and the higher frequencies. Keep sticking with me. So if we look at our chakra energy system, it follows the same colors and the same type of principle that the scale of consciousness does. And we see, like, starting at our root, that's like our sense of safety, security, survival, and then we move up into the sacral and the solar. Those are the energy centers in our bodies that connect us to our 3D physical world. And then from the heart and up is where we are able to experience more of the enlightened emotions. This is where we have our center for like love, for communication, expression, thought, imagination, receiving information. I really like this chart that Joe Dispenza had in his show showing the 3 lower energy centers and the types of emotions and energy that get stuck in these centers. So feel free to pause this if you want to take a better look. So when we look at them all together, we're able to see these similarities. And so this is important when we're looking at things from a vibrational perspective, in all of these aspects on the energetic aspect to our humanness. So the higher emotion frequencies begin more so in the heart center with the heart chakra, and those actually create an electromagnetic field around us that can be up to 9 meters wide. And so it actually enhances our life force energy, and it helps make us more energy and less matter. But the lower vibrational frequencies, emotions that get stored in those lower 3 chakras, as we saw in Joe's diagram there, those actually draw energy from our environment, from our energetic field, the electromagnetic field, and deplete our energy and actually make us more matter and less energy, less frequency. So we become heavier and denser. So like when we speak, we intuitively already do this. Emotionally, I feel really heavy. That's accurate. And when we're like, oh, I feel so much lighter after that, that's also accurate. So fun fact, we have 37.5 trillion cells in our body, and each one generates 0.7 volts of electricity. So when you do the math on that, it's 2.63 trillion volts of electricity generated by a human body, within a human body. So when we have our energy good and that electromagnetic field is strong, that is how much freaking power we have just within each human body. So I want to tie in next that how we think impacts how we feel, and how we feel impacts how we think. And I want you to think about this concept, the phrase we hear, as above, so below, as within, so without. As above, our thoughts, so below will create our emotional state. And so that's within. So as within, so without. Our internal state is going to be projected onto our external world. So our thoughts are going to create the emotions, that's going to create the feel, and then that is what we put out in the world. That's the vibrational state we resonate at. And so you can think of yourself as sort of like a radio station that you tune into. And when you're tuned into that frequency, you're not going to hear the other ones. So this is how we start to then see the world not for how it is, but for how we are. And this gets into a little bit more with neuroscience and the reticular activating system, and I'm going to touch on a bit of that later. But I want you to get that concept. As above, so below, as within, so without. What's going on up here is going to affect down here, and what's going on in here is going to be projected and experienced and seeked out here. Through neuroscience, we know that by the time we're 35, we're 95% unconscious. So that means we're like 95% just memorized, autopilot, learned habits, behaviors, thoughts, and emotions. And so also through neuroscience, we know that this is all pretty much programmed in us by the time we're 7 because of our brainwave states. And without getting into that too much, basically we're in a hypnotic state up until we're about 7 or 8 years old. And around 8 is when we start actually forming the critical thinking mind. So this means that by the time we're 7, everything that we've experienced, learned, and observed, how we've emotionally felt, the things we've heard from our parents, from our schools, from society, we take that all in without self-reflection and without critical thinking. And as kids, we're kind of a little bit narcissistic in the sense that we kind of feel like the world revolves around us to a degree. And we also know we're highly dependent on the adults, parents, and caregivers in our life to survive in every way. So we tend to take a lot of things on much more personally and without much reflection on if there's any truth to it or not, or if we really believe in that or feel that or not. So by the time we're 7, we kind of already have an unconscious set of limiting beliefs about ourselves and about our world and how it operates and how we feel about relationships. We already have emotional patterns developed for this. So this means if, as a child you were emotionally neglected or invalidated, which a lot of us were, it was very common, or if you experienced a lot of abuse or violence, rejection, abandonment, you were made fun of and bullied a lot, you eventually these experiences get processed through your brain and become beliefs like I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, I'll never be chosen, I'm wrong in who I am, I'm bad for who I am, and so on. And that's going to tie into those emotions of things like shame and fear and guilt, or bitterness and anger and sadness. So touching on that reticular activating system part of your brain briefly, it's now going to become hyper aware of this experience because as whatever that experience was that happened to you was painful, it caused a huge emotional chemical charge through your body. And it's going to be logged in different parts of your brain too, but that's a whole other thing. And so basically, it's now going to start sifting and sorting your reality, looking for similar things because your nervous system went into an aroused state of fight, flight, or freeze to keep you safe. And so anything that's similar in your environment, especially if it's something that's repeated in your home environment or at school, your brain really locks in that memory and that pattern and goes, oh, this happens and then this happens and I feel like this. And so then we often start internalizing those emotions and we create that as beliefs about ourselves. And then we look at our reality and sift and sort through our reality through that lens of those experiences that were painful in attempts to heal them, prove them right, or to avoid them. And to piggyback on that, that means by the time we're adults, when we keep looking at our lives and we're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm living the same thing over and over, or I keep getting the same types of people, I keep attracting the same types of partners, I keep having the same issues with money, the same issues of work. This is why. Your reticular activating system sifts and sorts reality through what's most recent and prevalent to you. The problem with this is that when it comes to the emotional baggage side, it's something that happened to you forever ago in your childhood. It could be as early as utero or like birth and a baby, and so your mind doesn't necessarily remember, but your body does, and it still remembers that experience, and your nervous system will fire up anytime anything feels like it to keep you safe from that perceived threat. I have two quotes I want to share that are fitting with this. One of them, I forget where I heard it, but it's, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. The other one is from Carl Jung, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And this is why you'll often hear people in the healing community say that like your triggers are gold, they're your keys. Because when you start to recognize your triggers, that's your unconscious mind trying to be made conscious. There's a part of you that wants healing. And like I said, your body is going to remember everything, even if your brain doesn't. So stick with me. I'm still building this. I got to prime you to build our way up to where we're going. So we know that our bodies are made up of like 70% water. We know that the dominant molecule in the cells of our body is 70% or more water. We know, like I mentioned earlier, we have 37.5 trillion cells in our body. We also know that water holds memory, and we know that water responds to frequency and emotion, sound, intention, all that stuff, just like the rice experiment. When you put the rice in the water and you fill one and you set it with the intention of hate and you say awful things to it, and you do that with love in the other jar, and it actually will change the molecular structure, and you will see the visible difference in the rice in the water. This is why, from a neuroscience standpoint and even just physiologically speaking, what we speak, what we think, and what our intentions are everything. That's when I always say it's like, that's the magic, that's the spell casting. Our thoughts, our intentions, our belief create our reality quite literally. And because our bodies are mostly made up of water and it's responding to frequency and our energy all the time, our molecular structure will change. And this is how epigenetics kind of comes into play, and we'll start to shift things because we start having incoherence between brain and heart, and it creates what I consider dis-ease within the body through that incoherence. The next layer I want to add to this is mucus. Our body creates a lot of it to hydrate itself, lubricate itself, and protect itself from invaders, normally as bacteria or viruses and other types of toxins. We know that mucus is 98% water, and traditionally we look at it through those aspects, but I want to shift it through the lens of when I'm talking about a spiritual cold or flu or purge, that the invaders that it's trying to push out are the toxic limiting beliefs and thought patterns, the old ideologies that just aren't serving us, those old memories tied with emotions that are continuing to create loops and cycles in our lives that are perpetuating chronic dis-ease and incoherence in our minds, in our bodies, and in our spirit. So coming back to understanding us on a soul level as energy or frequency, we also know that energy cannot be destroyed, but it can be transmuted and alchemized. And when it's in free form, it can change rapidly. But matter, physical matter, takes longer to change. This is our 3D reality. Matter to matter is much harder to change. And this is something that the quantum field shows us. When we're doing deep healing work, energetically, frequentially speaking, our thoughts can shift much faster. Our soul can do the work and recognize things when we trace back our roots of our triggers, and we can start creating new neural pathways and shifting our neurochemistry and make energetic shifts in our body and start opening our heart chakra, start opening these spaces and start boosting our electromagnetic field. But the problem lies then within the fact that we still have all this density within our body that needs to leave in order for us to have full coherence, because there's still incoherence. Consider it like your body's way of purging buggy software from a computer system when you're reprogramming it. And your brain works very similarly to a computer with your neural pathways and stuff too. So sometimes the fastest, easiest way that our bodies can do this and release this energy is through bodily functions. Things like mucus coming out and discharge. It could be really dense bowel movements from constipation. Constipation on the metaphysical side, that's a side of holding on. What are we holding on to? What can't we let go of? Or diarrhea. Think more sense of urgency, fear, release. Vaginal discharge, uteral discharge, like your periods might be a little bit heavier sometimes. It can come out through acne. It can come out through vomiting sometimes. Vomiting is a sign of fear and violent rejection of an idea or situation. It might come out through sweat, coughing, gas. Many ways energy will secrete itself and exit the body. And so sometimes this comes on more aggressively if there's more deep stuff coming up, and other times it's a lot more minute, and a little cry and a sweat's good. And this is where Western ideologies and methods of the neck up treatments and medication only aren't really quite effective, because we need the whole somatic experience. The body's nervous system is designed to have the sympathetic nervous system engage in its fight, flight, or freeze, right? You're ready to fight, you're ready to run, you're ready to hide. And then after that, it needs to come back into the parasympathetic nervous system state to enter rest and digest, your restoration and recovery time. And we don't get a lot of that in this society. Everything now actually creates so many triggers, be it our external environment, how we relate to it and perceive it based on past experiences and the emotions logged in us, that we actually spend up to 70% of our day in a fight or flight response, which is extremely unhealthy. And when that's happening, we are taking blood away from the organs, pushing it into the extremities. We're pushing lactic acid through. We're getting our body primed and ready to go run, fight a tiger, fight a bear. And we're not getting the chance to breathe. The organs aren't getting the nutrients they need. Your body says, now's not the time to learn. Now's not the time to create. Now's not the time to reproduce or experience pleasure or relax. We have to fight. We have to survive. We have to make it through. And this is where it becomes more dangerous, when we're constantly living unconsciously, with even just having the power of a thought from a memory of a past experience alone being able to trigger that as many times a day as it's unconsciously being fired and wired. This is where I like to really factor in Louise Hay's work with How to Heal Your Body, the mental causes for physical illness. And when I tell you, almost every single time I look in here to reference a symptom I'm having, it is dead on. And when we think about the charts I showed you earlier with the chakra system, the emotion chart, scale of consciousness, all that, how those scale up, this book, its symptoms and the emotions attached to it are like dead on almost all the time. So I'll give you some examples from right now, because I've been sick and going through this, which is what's inspiring me making this video. The chapter of my life I'm heading into is requiring me releasing even more baggage from my past. And so as this trauma has surfaced, I noticed my body reverted back to the state that I was when I was 19, undergoing the most abuse and stress and trauma. And so there's a lot more of me that needs healing from that area of time, which took me back even further back into childhood to more like 5-year-old me, where certain things happened that completely shifted me. My body is ready to purge these. A cold, she references as too much going on, mental confusion, and disorder, small hurts. Aches, longing for love. Coughs, a desire to bark at the world, see me, listen to me. Earaches, anger, not wanting to hear, too much turmoil. Fever, anger, burning up. These are all very fitting for me, by the way, and what I was going through or what was repressed. Headaches, invalidating the self and self-criticism. Heartburn, fear, clutching fear. Liver is the seat of anger and primitive emotions. That has felt very flared up for me as I've been sick. A stuffy nose, not recognizing the self-worth. Pain, guilt. Guilt always seeks punishment. Respiratory ailments are a fear of not taking in life fully. A sore throat, holding in anger, swallowed anger, inability to speak up for oneself or express themselves. and stomach problems, dread, fear of the new, inability to assimilate the new. That's just to name a few of my symptoms. And when I tell you they are all spot on to how I would have been responding to the abusive or scary, overwhelmingly emotional experiences of my past, they're very fitting. And so my body is now allowing them to purge and move out. When we slow down enough and really move into more mindful practices with our body, things like breath work and somatic work are so important because they're going to help alchemize and move that energy through the body the way it's designed to, so it's not getting stuck and stagnant. But you may find then when you're doing somatic work or a lot of deep healing work, you feel really great, and then the body has to catch up and you start to purge and you feel not so hot. And it becomes very easy to have certain thought loops reappear. For me, being sick, I just kind of started learning, as we do in this society, suck it up, you're going to miss out, you're going to fall behind, keep going, other people have it worse, it's not that bad. I started gaslighting my own self and validating my own self, and so anytime I become sick, I'm severely lacking self-love and compassion. I abandon myself, I neglect myself, and I reject myself and my own needs. And so the cycle perpetuates, evolve or repeat. So this time when I was sick, the motto the whole time has been evolve or repeat. What would someone who loves themselves do? Where can I show up with more love and compassion for this? And what part of me is needing me right now? And this is where we dive into the psychology aspect of understanding parts work, because when we get back into those little experiences that happened when we were younger to little us, we started seeing the world through that lens, and that pattern repeated. And so that's manifested as adult me feeling that way and brushing off that aspect of me even more, perpetuating the cycle rather than changing it and healing it. I hope this is making sense. So like I was saying, when we're cultivating that relationship with our bodies, with breath work, somatic work, body experience, we can do body scans. If your head's hurting, if it's your left shoulder, your neck, you can ask these parts of your body, what do you need from me right now? Or what is this actually from? What is this actually about? And if you sit with it long enough, often something will come to you. You'll get a visual, you'll get a memory, you'll start noticing a thought loop. Like, people think they're meditating wrong because they're thinking. It's actually you just allowing space to start observing all the thought patterns coming through. It's making the unconscious conscious. And so we can sit and ask our bodies what's going on and learn how to relate to them in that way to figure out what they need and what needs attention, healing, and release. So we can actually start feeling better and actually resolving the root cause of our symptom rather than perpetuatingly band-aiding it. It's become very common and normalized in our society to be in a victimhood, martyring, lack consciousness of just feeling so stuck and helpless and disempowered and like, well, this is just how I am. This is just who I am. This is my life. My mom was like this. My dad was like this. This was my family. This was our history. They had this. Now I'm going to have this. And what all the modern science is showing us, and through energy work, through quantum work, neuroscience, neuroplasticity, epigenetics, it's not true. We're not stuck. We have so much power to change these aspects of ourselves when we shift our mentality towards them and shift the emotional state. We have so much power that is untapped, so much potential that is untapped within us, that we can completely redesign and reshape our entire lives from the inside out. But it is an inside out job. It's not going to be from the outside in like we're taught, like we're shown. If you're always waiting for the external reality to cause an effect rather than choosing to cause an effect, these are the universal laws, you're going to continue to attract the same thing. Because as above, so below, as within, so without. What you are putting out, you will continue to get back. And nothing changes if nothing changes. And when we're healing, it's not always pretty. And sometimes we start doubting ourselves and thinking we're doing it wrong. But healing is not linear. It's not going to be a steady scale up. It's cyclical. It's going to work in a spiral. And at first, maybe stuff's going to come up a lot. It's going to be really fast. But over time, it spreads itself out. And it takes longer and longer to get back. And each time you get to it, you have a new perspective and you're able to shed another layer, much like an onion. I know this was kind of long and I could go so much deeper on so many more of these topics, but I really hope that this like resonated, this sparked something different. This changes how you think about and relate to your body and life and how much capability you have and how much science has really shifted now. Our world in medicine's really shifted, and there are so many more doctors and psychologists out there who are seeing this, who are getting this, scientists who are continuing to prove how much more magic there is in this world. That's really not magic, it's just science, and it's all innate abilities and capabilities we have within once we learn how to tap into it with the proper tools, the proper guidance, support, and work.